We love our friends at Underdog Fantasy here at the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast. And if you haven't gotten in on Underdog Fantasy Bestball drafts, there's a big board super flex draft waiting for you right now. Get in and use the code FFF for first time deposit of $100 will get you $100, 100% match. Use the promo code FFF. It's going to be a lot of fun this offseason doing some best ball drafts and during the season pick'ems. Underdog Fantasy is the place to play. Billy and I love to play on Underdog Fantasy. If you're not there, get there. Download the app off the Google Play Store and wherever you download your apps, the App Store, and download. And for first-time depositors, use the promo code FFF Underdog Fantasy. See you in the best ball streets.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalists Podcast, powered by Underdog Fantasy and presented by Fantasy Data, home to some of the industry's most accurate rankings.
And welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast presented by Fantasy Data. And today we're going to talk about Mitchell Trubisky. I'm going to have some highlight reels off to the side, reminding you of some of the great plays that Mitchell Trubisky has made in his career, most recently with the Chicago Bears. Look at that pass to Allen Robinson. So in this short video, I want to highlight some of Trubisky's takeaways, some of the upside that he has, but also, offer some cautions. He's not the second coming, okay? But Mitchell Trubisky should be a usable fantasy quarterback. Looking at his career, Trubisky has been a boom-bust fantasy quarterback. Looking at his rookie year, he had 2 top 10 finishes in 12 games. He had 2 finishes in between 11 and 18, so a middling QB2 week, and then 8 of those games he finished below 18th on the weekly finish. It's important for us to understand the context, which is why I'm talking about weekly finishes, okay? So, yes, there's a little bit of ad. That's what we have to deal with, but skip the ads. Anyways, in 2018, during 14 games, Mitchell Trubisky had 6 of those games be in the top 10. And in 2018 as well, he was the quarterback 11 in fantasy points per game. There were no games in 2018 where he finished between 11th and 18th. Instead, he was, as I said, boom bust. He finished, had 6 games in the top 10. 8 of his games were 19th or worse. So you're really getting a player who was really on it or off. In 2019, Trubisky had 4 games in the top 10. He had 3 between 11 and 18, and then 8 of his games out of 15 were 19th or below. So he definitely struggled in 2019, and in 2020, 4 of his 10 games he finished in the top 10 on a weekly finish among quarterbacks. But once again, like the theme that I want to hit on time and again with Mitchell Trubisky is he boom bust. So he had 4 top 10 in 2020, but he had 6 19 or below there once again, just like in 2018 when he was the quarterback 11 fantasy points per game. In 2020, he had 6 games 19 and below. There were no games where he was 11 to 18. Boom bust. He either was completely on or completely off. And what made Mitchell Trubisky fantasy successful? Well, it usually had to do with his rushing yards. Looking back in 2017, he had 3 games where he rushed for at least 40 yards. And when you're getting 40 yards on the ground, that's equivalent to 100 passing yards, okay? That's a big deal for quarterbacks. And in those weeks, he finished 5th, 17th, and 20th. Unfortunately, not throwing a couple touchdowns in those weeks, but that was his rookie year. In his second year, his sophomore season, we saw some explosive games from Mitchell Trubisky. including his 6-touchdown game against Tampa Bay back when their defense was atrocious. He finishes the quarterback one on the week, 43.5 fantasy points. But there were 4 games as well that season. Actually, there were 5 games where he had 40 or more rushing yards that season out of 14 games. So more than a third of his games, he finished with over 40 rushing yards. Once again, it makes up for him not throwing for a lot of yards. Yes, he had games like against Miami or New England, even Detroit, where he had over 300 passing yards, but there were also complete duds. 165 against Minnesota, 110 against LA, 163 against Minnesota again, 162 against Green Bay. The theme with Trubisky is he's inconsistent, and he could give you these massive upside weeks if he's on, but absolutely implodes if he's off, which is why he's a great best ball target. So let's pivot this to Underdog Fantasy and the best ball streets. The super flex leagues are driving up quarterbacks, and we want to take a look at where Mitchell Trubisky is going right now. He is currently the quarterback 32. So let me zoom in just a little bit. Mitchell Trubisky is currently the quarterback 32 in ADP right now for the Superflex Big Board Draft, and that's ahead of Matt Corral, ahead of Sam Howell, ahead of Taysom Hill, Desmond Ridder, and Marcus Mariota. And if you're quarterback 32, that means you're pegged to get a starting spot. And the rumor right now is that Mitchell Trubisky is going to get signed to big money because the quarterbacks in this rookie class are not that strong. So I've been buying and selling Trubisky depending upon what the value is. Like, I sold him for a mid third round pick in a super flex league, which I was strong at quarterback and I could use the pick elsewhere. I needed some running back depth. But if you're needing quarterback depth in super flex leagues and he's on your waiver wire, or Marcus Mariota's on your waiver wire, like I think those two are pretty similar. I think Trubisky offers more boom upside. But if Mitchell Trubisky is out there, go pick him up. And if you're in best ball leagues, right now he's going at quarterback 32. Like, I would take Mitchell Trubisky over Jimmy Garoppolo, over Carson Wentz. Like, he should be in the same tier-ish as Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff. I don't know if I would sneak any higher than that, but if the rumors come to fruition that he goes to New York, Daniel Jones instantly drops, and then Mitchell Trubisky goes up. Remember, Brian Daboll, the new head coach for the New York Giants, was the offensive coordinator in Buffalo last season, and that's where Mitchell Trubisky pretty much sat behind Josh Allen, also a mobile quarterback, and now Brian Daboll is in New York. So the rumors that Mitchell Trubisky comes to New York and pushes Daniel Jones either out of the starting spot or forces him to get better, I think is a real possibility. So quarterback 32, I think, is a discount right now because if he takes over the starting job, he could overtake Matt Ryan. Jameis Winston might sign a backup spot. We don't know. There's ambiguity there. If Mitchell Trubisky starts, like looking at his past finishes, quarterback 11 in fantasy points per game, quarterback 29 in a 2019 season where, he was really inconsistent and had a left shoulder dislocation and labrum tear, which affected him from week 4 onward. Like, he had labrum repair surgery, which he rushed back from and should not have. It was a high level injury. So in 2019, even though he had an overall terrible year, 14 points per game isn't going to get it done. Still, he had 4 top 10 games. Okay. So looking at Trubisky, he's a boom bust quarterback, great for best ball. You want these quarterbacks who aren't just middle of the field. Trubisky's probably going to contribute points for you if you draft him as your 3rd or 4th quarterback and you've got 2 stud quarterbacks. He's a perfect target for waiting on quarterback because he probably will outperform his quarterback 32 ADP right now. So those are the good. The bad is that, of course, he busts from time to time. His player profiler comp is Teddy Bridgewater. His throw velocity is 50th percentile, so not very strong. And we know he's mobile, so that's good. But if he's asked to rush the ball a little bit more than normal, that may take passes out of the offense for the New York Giants, and that would negatively affect Kenny Golladay. That would negatively affect Kadarius Toney. But Trubisky is the draft capital. He's got the 40-yard dash. He's the 84th percentile rusher. He ran a 4.67. So I want to just emphasize that Trubisky is a value right now, even though he is shooting up boards and there are some very quarterback thirsty teams. Mitchell Trubisky's resurrection is impending. His career resurrection, he spent a year sitting behind Josh Allen. He saw how a mobile quarterback who struggled with accuracy, and Mitchell Trubisky has struggled with accuracy from time to time. And the hope is that if he does go to New York or anywhere else, that spending that time learning how to elevate his game and getting out of Matt Nagy's shadow may be of benefit. So go out and draft yourselves some Mitchell Trubisky. Right now, as I said before, he's a value on Underdog Fantasy, going as the quarterback 32 behind Kenny Pickett. I do like Davis Mills ahead of Mitchell Trubisky. I think Davis Mills is a nice developmental piece. Davis Mills actually had more top 10 weeks than Ryan Tannehill, but actually looking over the past 16 games, Mitchell Trubisky has had more top 10 finishes than Ryan Tannehill. So I think it makes sense that you should target, especially Mitchell Trubisky, in these best ball drafts here in March. We don't know where he's going, and his ADP is only going to rise when we find out more about Mitchell Trubisky's situation. All right, good luck drafting. And if you haven't downloaded Underdog Fantasy, make sure you do. Use the promo code FFF for first-time deposit match, 100% match up to $100. And yeah, thanks. If you haven't already, subscribed to the YouTube page here for fantasy data. You can follow me, Bradley Stalder, at FF Stalder. You can follow my partner, Billy, at FF Musio on Twitter as well. And if you like it, give us a like, make a comment, engage with us. Love to hear your thoughts on Mitchell Trubisky, and good luck drafting.